I wish to address the responses that I had on my latest video regarding why I believe a message to all nerds. Now, this is not a message to nerd 122 nerds, Spark, or whatever his name is, because we have a specific agenda. However, I did express why I believed. I believed in God because I believed in the soul. This is something that I have experienced, but it's also something that is easily observable as I have delineated. And even though people want to say that the consciousness is part of the neurological system, many people who've studied neurology have remained unconvinced. In fact, there's a professor, James Brower, of McGill University in Montreal, who had lectured here in Detroit and who had done experiments which almost conclusively proved the presence of a soul rather than the nerve endings and the chemical elements that cause the various reactions to take place in the brain. Because the brain is either a transmitter or a receiver. In either system, the transmission and the reception cannot explain for experience of the observer. It only explains how it's transmitted, but at the very end, who is the observer? The chemicals? Are the observers the chemicals or the carriers? And therefore you have to conclude that the I of the person is a mind. And that this mind is independent of the physical condition. Now, this is not something that people can readily or wish to readily accept. So I use as an example of the concept of the power of the mind, the experiments of Professor John Wheeler, who, broken down, clearly states the following. It says the observer is the actualizer of the very basic elements, the very basic particles that we call photons or light waves, especially when they come from an indeterminate source. In other words, we don't know which way they're coming from or they would come from, and it is the observer who actually gives them their actualization. They make them real in our terms, that they become visible, and that they not only make them visible at the back end, at the end of their trip from whichever star they came from, but actually retroactively redefine their trajectory. And this is something that's incredible, that the mind has the ability to redefine the past from the onset. And that leads me to the conclusion that the mind actually is beyond time. That the mind has some kind of universal connection, and that this pervades the entire universe, and that the mind that we have is capable of being above time. Now, that's something I cannot understand how that works, but that it works, those are the words of Professor Wheeler. I did not make those experiments, and I did not show how the observer actualizes and causes the photons to become visible, to become real, and that before then, the professor explained, the photons were on a trajectory that was only waves of probability, whatever that's supposed to mean. That means they weren't real, they were ethereal. And this is a concept that the observer gives reality and sustenance to the observed existence, is a concept that is found in the words of the rabbis. The rabbis say that when a Jew says Kiddush, says the blessing on the wine every Friday night, that he becomes a partner to God in the creative process. Now, how's that possible? It's one thing that you become a witness to God, that you're testifying that God has created. But how do you become a partner to God in the creative process? Well, now that you understand Wheeler, or supposedly understand him, we can now understand this, that it is the observer who gives reality and finality to the existence, and in fact, not only finality to the existence as it is now, but at its original core. And this concept is also articulated in the words of the rabbis regarding the giving of the Torah. God created the world at an indeterminate point prior to the giving of the Torah in the year that we count 2,448, which is approximately 3,020 years ago. That's what we Jews believe, that the Torah was given 3,020 years ago. Concerning the giving of the Torah, the rabbis tell us that God made a condition with creation, that if the people of Israel will accept the Torah, then the world will be sustained. And if not, the world will be restored to mumbo-jumbo, to probability waves. It would not be a real existence. What is this saying? It is saying that existence is not necessarily concrete, that it is the observer who observes and accepts that there is a creator, and that the creator has created it for a purpose that gives permanence to the world. Now, what power do we have over creation? Well, I ask you, what power does the observer have over a photon that went out 5 billion years ago? The answer is only that the mind of the person is independent of physical existence, and the mind of the person is part of the universal mind, which is God's wisdom, or God's awareness, or God's will. And that the human being, vis-a-vis his ability to recognize and to observe, the human being's mind is what actually concretizes all of existence. That's what was said by the rabbis 2,000 years ago. This is what John Wheeler says today. So therefore, my conclusion based upon his experiment is that there exists a pervasive mind throughout all of existence. And it is this mind and this awareness that causes all things to be. And we have a part of this mind. And having part of this mind, why did God give us part of this mind? In order to give permanence to the physical world, in order to make the physical world a good world and a real world. The observer determines what he sees, how he sees it, and what he's going to do about it.